I was unmuted. Yeah, it started right when I turned it on.
Are we good? Is it recording?
Yeah.
Okay.
It started right away.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you this evening to our Economic Development Authority meeting. Tonight is Monday, July 22nd. Audra, can you have the record show that our city attorney, city planner, all directors are present this evening, along with our assistant city administrator, and absent this evening is our city administrator. Our first item of business would be to consider our approval of the minutes from June 24th, 2024. Have a motion?
Madam Mayor, I'll motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Brittany, seconded by Tina. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next item is bills and communication.
Thank you, Mayor. There's no bills or for review or approval tonight.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4, new business, a public hearing on proposed establishment of an economic development. At this time, I will turn it over to Jessica.
Madam President, Commissioners, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As was just noted, you do have a public hearing.
Is her microphone on?
I believe so.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay,
Thanks, guys.
thank you.
I'll get a little bit closer here. So as you just mentioned, Madam President, you do have a public hearing that is scheduled for this evening. The public hearing is meant to allow the EDA to receive public comment on the proposed establishment of Economic Development District Number 2 here in the city of Otsego. So the commissioners will recall that back in June, we had an EDA meeting and we talked about the need to call for a hearing if the city council and the EDA wanted to move forward with perhaps the proposed issuance of lease revenue bonds to finance the fire and emergency services facility. At that meeting, it was determined that we would call for the public hearing to be scheduled for tonight. And as is required by state law, we need at least 10 days notice of that publication of the hearing notice that occurred on July 6th. So we are in compliance with those publication requirements. Within that notice, we do have an invite for those that aren't able to come to the meeting tonight to submit written comments. Northland has not received any comments directly, but I'm going to pause there for staff to detail any of the comments that have been received.
Yes, Mayor, we did receive one that I believe was sent to all commissioners for this evening from Miss Gina Norris, who's a resident. She had written in favor of the development district from personal statement of how or garage fire at her own house. So that was the only written communication we've received.
Okay. So then beyond that, you do have a staff memo and then also a memo that was prepared by Taft, which is the bond counsel for both the city and the EDA, describing sort of the necessary statutory requirements when it comes to the issuance of lease revenue bonds. In order to kind of get there and utilize the full powers of 469-101, the EDA does need to establish an economic development district, and that is what we are here to do tonight. And then following the public comment period, you do have a resolution before you with the findings that creating that district is both proper and desirable. So with that, I will conclude my comments. That said, I'm happy to take any questions that the commissioners may have.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Jessica? Do we have Maren here too?
Oh, yes, excuse me, sorry. Maren McGill from Taft is here as well. So if there are questions related to legal authority or the issuance of lease revenue bonds and kind of how that ties into the EDA Act, we're happy to tag team those questions as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, at this time, we will open the public hearing. If you could come to the podium, state your name and address and limit comments to 5 minutes or less. At this time, the public hearing is opened. Any comments?
Good evening. My name is Joe Zeba. I reside at 15377 84th Court in here in Otsego. I'm here tonight to speak in favor. Sorry, I forgot. There they are. Never mind. Speak in favor of the formation of the fire district and eventually a full-time fire department. I've been in public safety, specifically fire and EMS, for almost 23 years. I work in one of the busier cities in the metro and one of the biggest cities in the state. The importance of having a fully staffed fire department is important now more than ever. In a city like Otsego, 5,000 in the near future has no business relying on already taxed cities such as Rogers, Elk River, and Albertville. This is in no way saying that they aren't doing the job. It is simply saying that it's time to cut the cord and start being self-sufficient. Projections that Chief Roche has presented indicate that the funds are there. The amount we pay into surrounding departments currently and in the near future for mutual aid will be redirected to our own public safety division with little to no impact to taxpayers aside from some initial capital costs in a fire station and equipment. Pinching pennies when it comes to public safety is simply irresponsible. As places like Rogers, Elk River, and Albertville continue to grow along with Otsego, what happens when one or more of them are busy serving their own community when we have an emergency? Their answer will simply be, no, we don't have the resources. Your next available partners from Otsego will then come from even further out: Zimmerman, Maple Grove, St. Michael, Ramsey. Feel free to Google their response times. I bet you won't like it. Every one of those cities, including our mutual aid partners, have a single responsibility, and that is to protect their citizens first. They will 100% tell Otsego no if they don't have the resources. To the mayor and the council working diligently on this project, I applaud you for your efforts and look forward to working with you in the future. To those of you actively working to impede growth and development, I ask that you check your egos and personal vendettas at the door and help move our community forward and provide the services that are warranted. When it comes to fire response and fire suppression, good enough isn't good enough. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Bill Abdrell and I live at 7669 Padgett Avenue Northeast, in Otsego. As the previous gentleman said, I've spent 21 years in public safety, mostly in the fire service, actually all of it in the fire service. I specifically now work in community risk reduction and prevention. And there's been a significant movement towards the economic impact of those types of activities in the fire service. The problem with a city that does not have a fire department is that the fire code, which is statutorily obligated by a city to enforce, without a fire chief and a fire department, that code is not properly delegated to a fire code official. Without that fire code official, the economic impact of fire prevention is broken. So if you think of economic impact as a chain and a continual chain, and that's based on our residential tax revenue, our business sales tax, business property tax, those are all economic impacts that help the city grow and stay profitable. NFPA did a study years ago that stated that a business that has a fire is actually greater than 80% likely to not rebuild in the location the fire was. So what that basically means is that when that business has a fire and it relocates to another city, you lose that economic impact, right? You lose the revenue generated by that business. Well, the fire department is the thing that comes and breaks that. It disrupts that break in the chain for economic impact. Not only is it the response to that fire and putting it out, but it's also the prevention of that fire in the first place. So without a fire department, there's no prevention bureau, there's no arson investigation or fire investigation unit. That's the tip of the spear in finding your fire problems in the city. It's all not there without a fire department, right? So I think a fire department is like an iceberg, and that 20% of its mass is above the surface. 80% of what the fire department does is not known to the general public because they don't see it. It's not just red trucks in a building. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes in a fire department to keeping your community safe. And that's what I do on a daily basis in a city of 75,000 people who has less than 10 fire events a year because of the major investment that city has made into fire prevention. And people will often tell us that our city, although we ramp up heavily on fire prevention, you'll drive away business. Well, that's just not the case because business and development has not slowed down in that city. And that offsets the cost of the fire department to the residential taxpayers. So with the high ISO numbers that we have, which will be lowered by a fire department because that makes up 50% of your ISO score, that's what drives the premiums on your interest rates. So if your fire department cannot drive those score numbers up, which drives your premiums down, you're not going to bring in businesses that want to, you know, you're just not going to get businesses because the insurance cost is going to be outrageous to the point where some insurance companies like FM Global will not insure somebody over an ISO 9. So those are things to consider when you're pushing the fire department away. Finally, like the gentleman before me said, good enough is not good enough in the fire service. Even though NFPA standards have not been adopted in the state of Minnesota, the prudent city doesn't say we're not going to go with what NFPA says because we're not required to. The prudent city is going to do the best they can to meet those standards. And right now, in a suburban city, which is 500 to 1,000 people per square mile, you must have 10 people at a fire event, and that's a low hazard fire event. So that's a single family home. You must have 10 people there in 10 minutes, 80% of the time. And I can promise you that your auto aid partners are not doing that. And it's at no fault to them because they've built infrastructure to protect their cities. Nowhere are they required to build infrastructure that protects our city. Finally, the American government exists for 3 reasons: to protect the lives, property, and rights of the people. Without that, American government does not exist. So if this government does not want to protect the lives and property of the citizens, I would argue that it has no purpose. So with that in mind, I'll yield whatever time to the next person. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more comments?
Hello.
Hello.
Dan Freiberg, 125-7796 Street Northeast, Otsego. It's going to say everything Bill was going to say, but he got ahead of it. Just kidding. It was very detailed. I'm not much of a public speaker, but I just wanted to say thank you to most of the city council members and all city staff for all their hard work on this fire department project. It does mean a lot. You know, I was born and raised here in Otsego, been here for 35 years. I know that the fire department project has been on the discussion table for a long time. I just want to say that it's about time that we move forward on this matter. I know that there may be some in the room that have some financial concerns of the fire department. But, you know, like Bill had talked about the economic issues, but the totality of a fire department, there's a lot to it. And as a first responder myself, not in the fire field, but maybe next lifetime. But I just wanted to say that the totality of fire departments, there's a lot to it. It's not just, you know, responding to calls for service. It's also about prevention, you know, getting out in the community and being a part of the city. And then they also do a lot of things out at events and, you know, car seat clinics and education. And most importantly, if something bad were to happen in the city, it would be nice to have our fire department to respond to a scene than relying on other cities to do it for us. Especially if they have their own issues that are happening at the same time, I would expect that our city fire department responds. But I'm in favor of this program or this project, obviously, and I hope that you guys move forward with it. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello,
Hello.
I'm Greg Hubbard, address 11432 79th Lane. They all said it. I just support the fire department, so I agree with all the stuff they just said. Keep it simple. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Judy Seibert, 9721 Jandel Avenue Northeast, here in Otsego. I am fairly new to the city and a member of the Public Safety Commission. I have a 30-year background in public safety, the last of it as an emergency manager for the federal government. I strongly support the EDA and pushing forward with the fire department. I think that in any widespread disaster such as a cyber attack or a cyber event like we just recently saw in the news, an electromagnetic pulse, an area-wide power outage in the middle of the winter that goes on for a long time, those events that people don't think of very often, but in any kind of an event like that, if we don't have our own fire department, we're not going to be first on anybody's list. And we need the fire department here in the city to be able to organize the city's response to some kind of an event like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other comments? Pause one more time. Final comments? At this time, we will close the public hearing and bring it back up to council. As Jessica said, we do have Maren here also from Taft. If anyone has any legal questions regarding the ability to exercise our right to move ahead with this, and then Jessica's here and Sabrina. Do you have any updates?
President, I just want to make note of the document that Councilmember Dunlap had requested should be printed out for everyone, just as a note that wasn't included in the original packet.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2024-3.
There's no space.
Establishing economic development district number 2.
Second.
Motion by Brittany, seconded by Tina. Is there any discussion?
Madam President,
Yes.
the statute requires that the EDA find that the establishment of the economic district is, quote, proper and desirable. To that end, I've prepared a report of my findings to address this question. This is a lengthy report. I'm not going to read it here, but I will just briefly summarize some of my findings. On the question of the proper establishment of District 2, the operations of the EDA are inconsistent with state statutes. Since we have not met in over 4 years, we are required to meet on an annual basis to establish a budget, which is then approved by the council as part of its budget process. We are also required to provide an annual report to the council and have not done so. This leaves the status of the EDA in question. I have been unable to find any similarly situated cities. Next, the EDA is being used in order to avoid a citizen's petition. To be clear, this is an action that is allowed by statute through derived powers. The action is completely unjustifiable. Just because the council can do it doesn't mean it should. Removing the citizen's ability to petition does not increase transparency or communication, and it damages the credibility of elected representation. Finally, it's important for residents to understand the fire study did not recommend starting a municipal fire department. An analysis was performed to determine what would happen if we abandon the contracts and put a standalone station at the location that is being discussed today. The study found that this resulted in, quote, the poorest performance of all of the scenarios examined. To match the performance of the contract providers, 4 total Otsego stations would be needed. The study identified the location of Development District 2 as a potential site for a substation for the Albertville Fire Department to operate and manage, to be built once the metrics for the response time supported such an endeavor. Had the council followed that recommendation, the building would be much cheaper to build and operate because it wouldn't need an expensive training facility or barracks. For the reasons outlined above, I find that the establishment of District 2 is not proper. On the question of the desirable establishment of District 2, the cost of owning and operating our own fire department will increase the total property tax levy by 22% in 2025, 62% in 2026, and 46% in 2027, and for at least the next 20 years. A significant portion of that permanent 46% increase in the tax levy will fall on businesses and industry and may discourage future development. The fire study also provided an analysis on the coverage area of the contract providers versus a standalone station. The findings note that the location of Development District 2 would cover, quote, a region of the city that is currently less developed. The analysis shows that the contract providers can cover the business and industry sectors within Otsego especially on the west side. This makes it clear that business and industry would not benefit from the establishment of Development District 2. Finally, the true costs of owning a municipal fire department have not been explored. To match the service levels of our existing contract providers, we will need more stations, more staff, and more equipment. The escalation of commitment will put future councils in a position to have to once again consolidate our fire services. This is what the city of Falcon Heights recently had to do. After examining the cost of contracting with their neighbors, they found that they could provide a higher level of service at half the cost of what their municipal fire department was able to do. As a result, they dissolved the city fire department, which had been in place for 72 years. With this plan, the council has put us in that same situation. A permanent 46% increase in the tax levy is unsustainable. For the reasons outlined above, I find that the establishment of District 2 is not desirable. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
public safety is about prevention. I think we heard that tonight. And it is our job to provide the city with public safety. And that is what we are doing. So I made a motion, Tina seconded. No one has anything else?
Is there any other comments? I have some comments. Ryan, I looked up because you had sent the email to staff this morning and I read your report this afternoon. I did look up quickly that Falcon Heights, as you said, is not partnering with St. Paul Fire Station 43, which is located on the border of Falcon Heights. In 2010, the population of Falcon Heights was 5,321. Now they are 5,233. So they've had a reduction. So to your point, you're saying that they did this to save costs. Yes, because they lost residents. There's not many people besides the State Fair and U of M campuses, some fields, but the population of residents is very small. Obviously, the State Fair is heavily used. They also rely on Roseville, St. Paul, Falcon Heights is present or was present. They won't be there obviously this year, but I mean, I attend a Back to the 50s event. And so there's multiple fire stations that come in to make sure that there's no issues. My comments are going to be the city council is elected to make decisions on behalf of the community. That is what we are doing this evening. Protecting the public is a core function of city government. And this is one that I will take very seriously. Establishing a fire department in Otsego operated by the city is critical to meeting the needs of our existing and future residents. The last fire study that we had was completed. This is the larger one, not the one that Capstone did. But in 2018, since then, we have added 1,922 houses at a rate of 384 a year. So the study actually predicted lower than that. I believe this will improve response time. The fire trucks will be on site. We will have EMT responses with this. Fire prevention, as most residents that spoke this evening talked about. I've been on the city council for 20 years, and this is one of the most frequent concerns that I have experienced over those 20 years. People have either emailed or called, and this isn't just when they've suffered a loss, as we got the email tonight from Gina Norris. This is when people are the neighbors of those losses, or they're questioning that how long does it actually take for people to get there? The EDA is a statutory authority confirmed by our city administrator, our city attorney, and bond counsel. This is an option for cities to use to finance projects. I believe that, you know, you've made some comments in the past that this was formed and it should be for economic development. Building a fire station is promoting economic development. It makes people in their homes continue to move here and feel safe. It also brings businesses in. It lowers the ISO rating. We have used the EDA in this financing formula to build our public works facility and this building that we're all in tonight. Our current emergency services issues. We have no control over administration, budgeting, operations, staffing, or service levels. What we have, it's based on property valuations and not service levels of how the other communities are charging us. Physical distance is a concern also. We have bridges, rivers, 101, 94. And I'm not saying that any of these other providers aren't doing a great job. Mutual aid will still continue when our location opens up in Otsego. When I look at the growth of Otsego, we can all say that things have been growing since 1960. Anybody living on a 1 acre lot is part of the growth. So when people say that, well, we just can stop building houses and we'll be able to help the other city can manage it. The door's been opened since 1960. Yes, has it grown at a faster rate? But those services that are required to save people's homes and their businesses and their families is on our backs. We have done 4 different studies. In the mid 2000s, Elk River did a fire, they did a fire study for their city, which involved looking at building a site here in Otsego or how that could work. In 2016, we had a discussion about forming a JPA with Albertville. That went nowhere. What the problem was is that the city councils could not come to an agreement on how it was going to look as this growed. No resolution was ever formed and no site was determined. So to your point, when you said that this could be an offsite, sure, but that helps that western side of the city. It doesn't talk about the center out. When we did the study in 2018, we specifically said, when we were meeting as a council with them, we said, we need to look at the center of our city and out and how we can meet the borders. So when the location was chosen, that was the factor in it. So you keep saying that site is terrible. We went over and over it and we talked about it can go everywhere in the center of the city to out, and then the mutual aid if we need them from out to in. And so it still is an overlapping feature. Then in 2023, we had the capstone study, which considered operational models for the fire station. The council at that time determined that we would move ahead with emergency service director, which we hired, and that we would be forming our own fire department. So we have done our due diligence to look at this. Residents need to feel safe living in our community. And Ryan, I do not believe that you're qualified to make some of the comments you did in your report. I think that I didn't see any comments that you've reached out to bond counsel, our attorney, our emergency service director, or our finance city administrator. These are just your opinion and they're not facts.
I guess on that point, I cited every single fact. There is it is very easy to validate everything that I have said.
I read your report, Ryan. What I'm saying is have you reached out to the bond counsel?
What
Have you reached, I'm just asking the question. It's a very simple question.
bond counsel is not my personal attorney. I wouldn't reach out to them to verify my position, which I understand is a minority position on this commission. I'm not going to spend their time confirming information that is plainly obvious.
And I felt in your report that you were picking and choosing some data. So that's my comment and I can disagree with you on that. Are there any other comments?
I don't think that that's appropriate. I just, the facts are very clear. I didn't hear anything that addressed anything that I had said, especially in regards to what the study found. It should be plain as day. And on the issue of mutual aid, I've heard this a couple times that we're going to have to depend on mutual aid going forward. And I would just direct everyone's attention to that study and the updated timelines, the maps that I provided. We are not going to be able to get to 3/4 of the city of Albertville within 9 minutes. And we are going to expect them to cover the western portion of our city. Something that they do.
You just said we need to get to the city of Albertville?
Yes, for mutual aid.
Okay, just following along.
So we aren't going to be able to get to 3/4 of their city within 9 minutes, but we're going to expect them to cover the western portion of our city for free, something that they get paid to do today. I have a sneaking suspicion that when it comes time to sign the document on the dotted line, Albertville is going to tell us you have to maintain the contract. I think the costs are going to continue to go up.
So Ryan, if I may, you're saying that Albertville is going to have us still as Otsego maintain the contract with them?
I think they are not going to be able to provide us. The mutual aid that is being discussed here is very unmutual. They're going to be able to get to a significant portion of our city within 9 minutes, but where our station is going to be located, this District 2 location, is not going to be able to get to 3/4 of their city within 9 minutes. And the quarter that we could get to is mostly water, which we aren't equipped to deal with. So like I said, I think when it comes time to it, Albertville's going to tell us to go fly a kite.
The study was based on our current roads and Dan, you were in those studies.
Yes.
And you were part of it, both you and Ron. It was based on being in the center of our city, using our infrastructure that we have currently now and what future development was planned out, correct?
Correct. And it was based on travel time from station to incident. So Director Roush has talked quite a bit about the difference between response time and reflex time. Because one of the other issues the study identified was the current staffing models for the departments and dispatch issues, especially with Elk River and Rogers Fire Departments, and how that impacts the time before or the time between when a call comes in and when the trucks actually roll, or to when the truck actually gets to the fire scene. Director Roush is here and could speak capably to those issues.
Oh, we're still in our discussion. Daryl, would you mind speaking? And then Maren, would you mind responding to the comments about the EDA stuff? Thank you.
I would challenge Director Dunlap's contempt that we will not reach any areas of the city within 9 minutes. I've physically driven to all of the city parks, which are pretty well distributed. You saw those times in the presentations that I did. All of those times are less than 9 minutes, significantly less. An important part of the plan that I put forward is having career firefighters in the station, which takes care of that 6 to 7 minute response time that it takes for a volunteer department to get a truck on the road. And those times are pretty well documented, the time that it takes. Not criticizing them, they're volunteer staff departments. Okay. You may get a career staffed SUV quicker than that, but in the model that we're putting forward, you will have a fully staffed and equipped fire engine with 1,000 gallons of water on and a 1,500 gallon minute pump within the times that I've laid out in the presentations that I've done.
Thank you.
And up until now, nobody has come to me and asked me to verify that. I'd be happy to take any of you go drive around the city, because I drove each and every one of those routes in the direction of travel, making sure that if I stopped at a stoplight, I marked the time. So that is actual response times. Okay. And I used a pickup and drove not over the speed limit, but right at the speed limit, because I thought that 70,000 pound fire truck has a little less pickup. One of the things that you've heard me say before is roundabouts actually help that, because we're not stopping at an intersection waiting for a red light, and we're not stopping a 70,000 pound truck and then restarting it from a dead stop. So roundabouts actually improve response times between 4 and 7%. All of that was factored into the actual drive times that I did. Okay.
Thank you.
Madam
Thanks,
President,
Daryl.
if I could just add to the study done in 2018 looked at multiple scenarios. I want to say A through G, and each of those involved the existing scenarios involving new departments in Rogers and Elk River, moving those departments, where the departments would be in Otsego, absent any operational considerations. But and one scenario was if Otsego built fire facility and absent any other departments, what would the response time be? But the assumption that the council used going forward is that mutual aid will continue to exist. And that was one of the things borne out in the discussion of the 2023 discussion, was that Otsego would finally be in a position to contribute to mutual aid where they haven't. If you look at a map of the region and you have multiple departments in Rogers, multiple departments in Elk River, the one in Albertville, multiple departments in St. Michael, there's a big area in the middle that there's no service facilities. And it's, as was stated in the 2018 study, separated by physical barriers and barriers that can be obstructed, which was a concern in the 2000 study with Elk River, as to why there was discussions about a facility in Otsego because of the limitations of the Highway 10 crossing and the railroad that could impede Elk River Fire from reaching the site. With the Albertville department, you have 94 and the 2 crossings into Otsego, plus Burlington Northern now talking about increasing usage of that rail corridor through their community that impedes access. And then of course, Rogers has the situation where they're covering former Frankfort Township And the concern there being County Road 36 being the primary route in and out of that area, especially to the residential neighborhoods for the quickest response, which, as we now know, is frequently obstructed by flooding. So the assumption and looking and the conclusions that the council used from the 2018 study was to say, where do you best locate a facility in Otsego based on the primary assumption that this will be the first response, but also recognizing that these surrounding departments will contribute to public safety in the region, including Otsego going forward. Madam President,
Yes.
just really quickly on that, I think that's the key that everyone needs to understand. This District 2 location that we're talking about, we will not be able to provide mutual aid for the other agencies in a timely manner. They will be able to get to our city, we won't be able to get to theirs within 9 minutes. All of the studies that we've looked at, all of the time studies, the driving study that the chief has done shows we cannot provide the type of service we would get in return because of the location of this station.
I would like to address that comment. Having career staff in the station, we take off that volunteer response element. We will immediately dispatch our career staff on mutual aid calls and then backfill the station using paid on call staff. So the response will leave the station at the same time frame that it does when it goes to somewhere in Otsego. That said, mutual aid is rarely as emergent as that first response. Our engine is going to have 1,000 gallons of water out. If your house is on fire, we're either going to put that fire out with the first 4 people there and 1,000 gallons of water, or it's probably going to be a significant loss. The mutual aid in many cases is used for rehab and for restaffing when that first crew is worn out. That's a well-recognized process throughout the fire service. And any community that uses mutual aid as the initial response element for a structure fire is not doing their job. And the council that allows that to happen is not staffing their department at an appropriate level. Our plan is to put 4 to 5 people on those engines every day, using a combination of career people and part-time people and interns, which will leave the station in under 2 minutes. The department that I came from when I came here, their average response time in 2023 was in 1 minute and 56 seconds. But if you take out the non-emergency calls, that time was 1 minute and 14 seconds. That was in a 2-story station. Okay, this is in a 1-story station. The dormitory is located very close to the apparatus bay purposely to make sure that it's the response times are good, and they will leave the station immediately. Another element of that is if you get there quickly, rather than arriving 19, 20 minutes after the incident, the fire is much smaller. So it's much easier to deal with. So I think the plan that we put forward actually makes sense. It's very effective, but it's also efficient. It does give us significant ability to provide mutual aid to our neighboring departments. We've had discussions so far with 6 of the neighboring departments. All of them have indicated a willingness to be part of a mutual aid plan for the area. I would expect that we will see the neighboring departments over a period of time. At least some of them will convert to a volunteer career staff model, much as we're building. And I think when that happens, the response times from them as well become better on that mutual aid side.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chief, I would just say that the response time is a separate issue. What I'm really talking about is the drive time, right? Having more people at the station or having them full-time employees doesn't improve the drive time. So we aren't going to be able to
I can be anywhere in this city, drive time in 9 minutes. You may disagree with that, but I have driven them, each of them individually. I can be virtually anywhere in this city, with the exception of maybe Norris Landing, in under 9 minutes.
Right, and my
If you're
point
only
is,
talking about drive time.
right, drive time, Elk River, Albertville, Rogers.
Well, Parish Avenue, I didn't actually drive to Elk River because that's not the area that I was charged with working on. I think that I could probably be in the south end of Elk River in 9 minutes as well. And certainly can be in Albertville. Costco was a 6.5 minute response time, 4.5 minute drive time.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Daryl. Maren?
Madam President, I don't know if the questions relate to bond issuance or other matters, but I'm happy to step in if it's a question more suitable for me, or I'll let Maren take it if it's related to bonding.
Okay.
I can start, and then if you want to jump in.
Yeah.
Certainly. Good evening, Madam President and Commissioners. So I think there's a few points that I'd like to respond to in Commissioner Dunlap's report that was distributed today. The first is the point that's been discussed, Commissioner Dunlap's argument that the Otsego EDA, its operations are inconsistent with Minnesota statutes. And that's just not true. And Commissioner Dunlap doesn't really provide any evidence for that statement. The Otsego EDA in 1992 was properly established by an enabling resolution. We've reviewed that resolution and bylaws that were later adopted very closely. Several attorneys at my firm have reviewed those, and the EDA was properly established. It is true, as Commissioner Dunlap states in his report, that the EDA has not been in perfect compliance with the statute since the EDA was established in 1992. It is correct that the EDA hasn't submitted annual budgets, hasn't elected its officers, hasn't provided an annual report. That's true. But there's nothing in the statute that says if the EDA is not in perfect compliance with those different requirements, that the EDA is invalid as a public entity and a legal entity. Commissioner Dunlap references Minnesota statutes 469 with HRAs, housing redevelopment authorities, and the law by which an HRA would be dissolved. None of those facts exist here. In that statute, an HRA is dissolved and inactive when it transfers to the city all of its property, assets, cash, or other funds. A public hearing has to be held with 10 days published notice, and a city council resolution affirming that the HRA is dissolved has to be approved by the city council. Here, the EDA has HRA powers, but the EDA exists under the EDA law. So this wouldn't exactly be dispositive if those facts had happened, but also those facts have not happened. A public hearing has not been held. The EDA has not transferred to the city all of its property, assets, or cash. So in summary, just because the EDA is not in strict compliance with the EDA law, that does not invalidate the EDA as a legal entity. There's nothing in the statute that says that it's invalidated if it's not in perfect compliance. And the EDA in the last month has done a few separate things to bring the EDA back into partial perfect compliance with the statute. On June 24th, officers were elected. Official newspaper was set. This public hearing today was properly called. And in the future, I'm sure that an annual budget will be submitted to the city, and an annual report will be submitted as well. But today, this EDA is a valid public entity under the EDA law and has the authority to establish this development district. Secondly, I just want to note, this is something that I noted, or TAF noted in our memo to the EDA, that today the EDA must find, in order to form the economic development district, that the establishment of the district is proper or desirable. The EDA does not need to make any findings in order to make that statement. You can just make the statement in the resolution. Are there any other questions? Or David, would you like to comment on the EDA?
I don't think I have any further comment unless there's questions. I'd be happy to answer those.
Anyone have any questions?
Just a quick one. I mean, you made the comment that I didn't cite anything, and then you listed where I had cited things. I am kind of curious. To my point, I have not been able to find a city that is similarly situated where they have not done a budget on a regular basis for the EDA. It is not met on a regular basis. Are you aware of any other cities that are in that scenario?
Lots of cities.
Do you have any examples that I could reference?
Jessica Green from Northland could probably comment on that.
I would agree with Maren. We do a lot of financial planning, et cetera, for various types of cities. I'm not going to be able to give you one off the top of my head, but there are plenty of cities that don't budget for their EDA, for their planning commission, for their utilities, for example. But it does happen very often. And there's lots of cases where we've seen cities that do have an EDA and they don't meet often. They meet as needed. Very common.
Because the problem that I'm having, and one that really hasn't been addressed, is if we don't have a budget and the EDA commissioners are required to be paid out of the budget, what can we do? We can't meet in order to set a budget if we have to pay ourselves from a budget that doesn't exist. And I wish that could be resolved somehow.
Commissioner Dunlap, I believe Adam had talked about at the last meeting that there is a contingency budget within the council's
Yes, I
budget and
did.
there could be transfers made. The other thing with accounting is that you can always set up an interfund loan that could be sort of addressed with the next budget for the following year. So there's a number of things that you can do if for some reason you are to have a deficit position or a deficit cash position due to those payments to the commissioners. But again, to Maren's point, just not having the budget or not meeting on a regular basis does not invalidate the validity of the EDA.
Sure.
Madam President, I would just add one more thing, which is I'm aware of multiple cities during COVID and immediately after COVID where the EDAs or HRAs did not meet for a significant period of time due to the chaos caused by COVID. And I think that may have partially been in play here. I don't know for sure, but I mean, that was a reason that a number of cities, EDAs and HRAs did not meet for an extended period. Because COVID, only essential meetings happened during that time frame and EDAs were not at the time considered essential. So a lot of those meetings kind of fell by the wayside during COVID.
Any other comments? Otherwise, we have a motion and a second. A call. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Moving on, old business, we have nothing listed. Sabrina, do you have anything?
No, Mayor. Or sorry, no, President.
Next is reports, nothing listed. All right, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Tina, seconded by Jeff. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Meeting is ended.
Up in the front room, we have the board set up and has the station time. Invite the council to look at them, and the public as well.
Okay, and I will make a note that as if they probably didn't pick it up, but that information is up front on the left-hand side. But the meeting is ended. You are welcome to go up to the front and look at fire station items. Is that what he said? I couldn't really hear.
You're doing.
Okay, sorry.
So.
Okay, all right.
I
Thank
think
you.
you said
Thank you.
diagram of the design.